This podcast is part of the Pathological Nerdcasters Network. Find more at pncn.rocks, where all the geeks come to play.
Yeah, but they're... Hey, you're breaking anymore.
This is Brandon of the What Did You Play This Week podcast, and I'll try to edit that as best I can. And I'm here with Mark Swanson, who is a local, we'll call you local, 30 miles away is local, game designer. Well, first he's a professor, and then he is also a game designer, and he has a game coming to Kickstarter in the fall. That game is called Feudum. Why don't you tell hi to everybody there, Mark?
Hi, everybody.
And let's just learn a little bit about you a little bit. So you are a professor of marketing?
Yeah, it's actually strategic communication in the journalism school.
And at University of Missouri.
Uh-huh.
I would say Mizzou, but I don't know that everybody in the world calls it Mizzou.
True, very true. Been there for over 5 years. It's a good gig. I get 3 months off in the summer, which means a lot of games.
Well, hey, that's the way to work it. So you and your, I guess you have so much off time, decided to design a game.
Yeah.
What was it that tickled that need to design a game? What was the starting point?
Well, I think when you play as many games as I have, and I don't know if I've played more than you, you've probably played quite a few as well, but hundreds and hundreds of games, at some point it's hard not to think about the game that you would create. And as you play more games, you get to you get keen on different mechanics, everything from worker placement to area control to action programming to auctions and bidding, some of my favorite mechanics. And I started to think about what combination of mechanics would make up a good game. More than that, what kinds of themes would I put together with mechanics, right? I mean, to me, it's all of those things coming together that form a good game. If you have one of those things without the other, it's not as satisfying. So is the theme married to the mechanic? Is there here's something that you think about a lot too. Is there a unique mechanic?
Yeah.
I mean, because everything's been done. Nothing's new under the sun, right? Until you play a game like, Wallenstein, and you have like this tower where you throw little cubes into to determine the outcome of the battle. That was very unique for me. Or Traders of Genoa, where you have this stack of discs, and as you move through the town, the stack grows smaller, and so the number of movement spaces also grows smaller. That was unique to me, and I always mentally homed in on games with unique mechanics and thought, could I devise a game with a unique mechanic? Very cool.
That's everybody says that there's a game in them somewhere. If you play enough games, you're going to have that idea or that. It's not hit me yet. So that's what I'm still in awe of people who put these things together and they actually work. In my mind, if I try to put something together like this, it just falls apart. So let's kind of go back. When did you start gaming, board gaming? Has this been a long time thing, or has this been a relatively recent?
I'm going to say in probably the late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay. So we're going to guess that Catan, maybe?
That wasn't my first game.
Oh, that wasn't? Okay.
No. Believe it or not, I believe it was a game called Cartagena.
Cartagena, okay, yeah.
Yeah. The little island prison that you try to escape from. And it was I don't know what year that was, but I remember, and I don't know, I guess they still do it these days, but back in the old days, there'd be like little pamphlets inside a game that kind of introduce you to other games that you could play. And so I thought these games are different than American games, which are very linear. You roll the dice, move your mice. I even read that Monopoly is actually 50% luck, that statisticians reverse engineered it and found it to be 50% luck. So you could wheel and deal to your heart's content, know all the price percentage payoffs of different color groups, and still lose to, your 9-year-old daughter who rolls better than you. And after, 2 hours of intellectual investment, it's very unsatisfying to lose because of dice.
It is.
Not that there's anything wrong with dice. I mean, dice are okay.
They have a purpose, and they even have a purpose in Feudum somewhat.
Actually, there's no dice in Feudum.
Well, you have to roll.
Well, that is true. That is.
We'll call it a die.
You're right. There's a progress die. But
Yes.
it's not.
No, it's not. So nowadays, what kind of games are tickling your fancy now?
Yeah, sure. The ones that come to mind are Zulkin,
Okay.
Terra Mystica, Rosenberg's Caverna.
Caverna.
Do you want like current games?
No,
or
whatever you've been playing,
classics?
things that you enjoy to play.
There's so many classics
'cause-
I like. I mean, I'm a fan of Reiner Knizia, Martin Wallace. I like that he can come out with the deep, heady game like Steam, but then also have fun with a game called Moonga Invaders.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I lost that during a move.
Oh no.
I've looked in every box I have in my garage. Maybe there's one I haven't looked in, but I think I lost that game.
Yeah. And moving's a pain. That's why I don't do it.
I mean, besides those, let's see, Taj Mahal.
Okay. So you're still, I mean, even though you do have those nice new games in there, you still are that classic kind of.
Yeah, Tigris and Euphrates.
Yes, that classic Euro kind
Princess, all the Aaliyah bookshelf games.
Yeah.
Princess of Florence.
Yeah.
There was a game called Hoity Toity. They renamed it.
Yeah.
But I'm old school that way.
That's cool. Yep. So let's get into Feudum a little bit, which is your game that you have coming to Kickstarter. First off, when you first see it, we're gonna let you talk about somebody else first. It's beautiful. I mean, just the look of the board and everything is beautiful. And I kind of read the story, a little bit of where it came from. And could you tell everybody about that?
Sure.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. So during the time that I was thinking about how to put a game together, I realized I'm going to need a good artist.
Yeah.
And I walked into a local ice cream shop called Sparky's. I don't know, have you been there?
I do, and that's what made me laugh so much when I saw it. I was like, I know that art.
And if you live in Columbia, you know that there's a lot of bands, local bands, regional bands that come and go to the Blue Note and play. Well, in this ice cream shop, there was a wall of posters with bands that were playing. That weekend, and there was a poster that was so cool looking. It had a behemoth, a monster peering over a hill, and I thought and it was very whimsical. It looked very powerful, like it could crush you in one fell swoop, but it also looked kind of silly and whimsical, and I liked that combination.
Yeah,
and I thought to myself, that's the cover of my box. How do I find this artist? And so I went online and I just started searching. It wasn't easy to find this piece of art, but I found it. And then I emailed the artist. His name is Justin Schultz. He lives in Jackson, Mississippi. And my subject line was "Man with a Dream." And I just said, "Hey, you don't know me, but I'm so-and-so, and I'm doing a board game, and I love your artwork, and would you ever think to partner on a game?" And to my surprise, he emailed me back and said, "I would love to do something like that." And there was chemistry between us. We hit it off, and I ended up driving 9 hours to meet him face to face. And when we went out for a few beers, I shared my vision with him, and he was on board.
Cool. He hit it out of the park for you, and that's going to be one thing that everybody's going to see first. So had you been working on the game much at that point? Up to that point?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a game that started out with me just scribbling on some poster board.
Okay.
I knew I wanted in the early stages of the game. I thought I want an economic ecosystem. I want a cyclical economy where archetypal medieval characters like a farmer and a merchant and an alchemist, a knight and a noble and a monk all were pushing resources from one guild to the next. And so I drew these different characters on a board, and I drew arrows. One pointed to one, the next pointed to the next, and I tried to figure out how could I create this cyclical economic system. And that's where it started.
Okay. So the mechanics of it kind of have some influences, I think. I mean, just sitting there counting up influence and doing that things, I was taken back to playing Dominant Species for some reason.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. I like that one. It hurts my brain. I like any game that hurts my brain.
And it's a wonderful little push and pull in multiple ways, because the guilds, like you're saying, they're moving things back and forth. And also, I mean, you're pushing and pulling out on the board. It's a nice little area control thing going on there. So, and let me see where I want to go with this. Why don't you give everyone, do you have an elevator pitch for it yet?
You know, I don't. I don't. And here I am, a professor of advertising, and you'd think that I'd be able to articulate the essence of the game in a paragraph.
Well, don't worry about it. Tell everybody the essence of the game however you would tell it now.
Sure.
What is Feudum?
Feudum is a game. Do you play video games?
Yes.
I'm sure you've played GTA, Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm not advocating that. If you have children, it's not a game for kids. But what I loved about that game and other games like it, video games, is that it's open world. Mm-hmm. When I first played that, I thought I was just blown away that I could do anything I wanted. I could follow the linear path of the game or not. With this game, there's an open world component to it. One game you might decide to do a lot of farming. Another game there might not be any farmers in the game. One game you might decide that you're going to pursue a peaceful existence. Another game you're just going to come out and try to attack other folks.
Okay.
So you can eke out your own feudal existence in this game, but the game still holds together even if people are doing very diverse things.
Yeah.
So the way that that would be the first word I'd use to describe it, is open world. Next, it has some, very recognizable mechanics in it. One is action programming, where, you have 11 action cards at the beginning of the round. You choose 4, and you play them one by one in turn order, and the game progresses. So I'll play an action card, the next player will, and things start to kind of happen on the board. In the middle of the board, you have a map, and then there are 6 guilds that flank the board. And I wanted a game where there was action happening in the middle, but then there were these areas where, depending on the characters that you migrated onto the board, you could then secure membership or prestige in the related guilds. So it's kind of like 2 games happening at once.
There is. Yeah. So looking back, we just played this. We sat down and played it. I lost horribly, which I think is kind of, it was going to be a given, I think. If anybody knows me, it was going to be a given. And plus, it's the first time playing. And
well, by
plus,
the way, I wasn't playing easy.
Okay. I was going to say, plus you know the game a little bit better.
Yeah.
And we had another gentleman here named Glenn who helped out, or who played as well. We kind of did the 3 different things, almost. I wildly just randomly tried to try everything I could. That's what my goal was, just to kind of see. You kind of, and I still don't know how you did it, kind of locked down a section of the board and kind of rendered half of us useless. Or a third of us useless. How about that? So, when you say there are multiple paths to victory, are there really multiple paths to victory?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the criteria for a good game for me is multiple paths to victory, and I've spent the better part of 5 years trying to make sure that the different paths were balanced.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely some math involved there.
There is.
And if I were to just tell you what I thought the three or four different paths to victory is, I'd say that one is to spread out on the board and be a ruler or be active in multiple regions, because you score points for that. Another strategy is to rule the guilds, and to make sure that, and to do that, you have to be a vassal, or you have to put feudums onto the board. Feudums is medieval Latin for fiefdoms.
Okay.
And another way is to put reeves into the guild. Think of those as like assistants within the guilds, because you score extra points by performing your dutiful function in the guilds, by facilitating the cyclical economy, by pushing and pulling resources through the guilds. So you can focus on that and score points for that.
Yeah.
Another path is to explore outposts and draw royal writ cards, and royal writ cards can have charters in them, which if you rule certain sections of the board, you fulfill your charter. You seal it with a king seal, and you score endgame points. So there's strategies that involve endgame points.
Yeah. And I tried a little, I reached over there and tried it once, and I kind of missed the whole writ part. But that's kind of a sign to me, well, not missing it. That's not the sign of a good game. The sign of a good game to me is I always felt like I was right there. That if I just had that one or two more things I could do. And this had that in spades for me. So, and maybe that's just because maybe I was one or two or three spots behind everything, but it did have that.
I think there is definitely in German board games or Euro style board games this kind of masochistic element to it, where you're just one resource away from what you need, and it's, I don't know why that's so enjoyable. It's when you play Agricola, you always wish there was another round.
Yep.
You're just one more round away from developing that farm you've always wanted to develop. But I think that's part of it.
Yeah, it is. And it was like I said, once you explained it, you sit down and it's kind of big and it's kind of overwhelming at first when you sit down. But I think once you explained it, and once you get that first round or two in there, you kind of know what's going on. You're not going to know how to do it, everything, but you know what's going on. And I think you can jump right in and you can play this, and I think that's good. I like the program action. You talked about that with your cards. And so everybody has a hand of 11 cards, right? And they each do different things. And I like that it's programmed action where you have a choice when to play it, as opposed to that, that horrible robo-rally kind of thing where you're stuck with it and then all of a sudden, oh, damn, I can't do that move now. So I like that. What is your favorite thing about the game? What is your favorite thing that's going on that just makes you love this game?
Choices. Yeah. When I think about my favorite games, I think of the ones that have so many things going on. I mean, you said it's accessible and easy to get into. I mean, there is a reference card here that kind of helps you understand what you're doing. But I would also consider this game to be nuanced. It's kind of epic in a way because there are so many different choices. It's the reason I like, Caelus. It's the reason I like Dominant Species or Brass. Talk about a brain burner. You know, Brass is accessible, but it's also difficult to master. Yeah. I played Through the Ages recently for the second time. Believe it or not, and that's another game where there's a lot going on, but it's satisfying in that respect. So my favorite part of the game, I think, is just the options.
The options that you have to do. I mean, have you ever seen, and I'm just kind of curious, this is just me asking, have you ever seen anybody just basically do the same thing every turn just about? Where they're just stuck in it and they're just going to say, I'm going to move, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Just kind of curious. Because there for a bit, I was like, I wonder if I tried something like that, find that combo. That
I think that, like a lot of games, you have to be somewhat opportunistic.
Yeah.
And when the environment changes, you have to alter what you do.
Yep.
So there are some games where you can kind of try to plan out what you want to do from the very beginning, and in this game you very much can do that. You can definitely pursue a particular strategy, but you have to be flexible.
Yep.
You have to say, all right, I'm going to pursue this strategy, but there's a little bit of a snag here. I need to take this detour, and then I can get back to my strategy.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, you could suffer.
Yeah.
So you have to be flexible, but you definitely can pursue a strategy.
Yeah, you can have a strategy. And you have to be aware of what's going on. I know it's one of those games where it was easy for me to get sucked into my own little world. And I missed things. And you saw me miss things. And Clinton saw me miss things and took advantage of it a little bit. So, when I say accessible, I don't mean that everybody's going to sit down and just be able to play this game and know what's going on. So it's going to take you a couple plays, I think, to kind of get rolling.
Yeah, and I think that's okay.
I do too.
I know that I know that I like a game when I fail miserably at it, but love it. I over the years, the older I get, the less important it is for me to win.
Yeah.
I just enjoy playing games, and I actually have a gaming group. You met Glenn. There's another fella in my gaming group named Eric, and then there's some other folks: Brett Barton, Samuel Tom, Dan Fritz. And they're all nemesis. They're opponents that if I beat them, I feel like I've achieved something because they're so smart.
Yeah.
But when I lose, I'm okay with it. It's just fun playing. I've learned how to be a better loser, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So let's talk about your group. I mean, did they help? They obviously had a huge help playing it. Did they help develop and kind of you took the little hints that they gave you and kind of tweak things and stuff like that?
Oh, sure. I have what I would call my first wave playtesters.
Okay.
In that first wave, it was Arthur Hartle, Dan Fritz, Brett Barton, Justin Beesman, James Gall, and they played and played and played this game, which, when I look back at it, I think to myself, they must have been enjoying themselves because they kept coming back to play it. But I gained so much valuable data from them, and every so often they would say something that would, cause a spark. And sometimes I'd have a long, reason in my brain why that wouldn't work. But other times I would think that's not only a good idea, I'm changing it. Yes, let's do that. And then I made sure to let them know, hey, that idea that you suggested, it's in the game. You made that part of the game up. Like Andy White. I forgot to mention Andy. He's a great friend of mine. He, you know how there are different vessel routes in the game.
Yep.
Like for instance, the airship.
The airships and the
it
ships.
used to be that the airship could just fly from one region to the other, but that was way too powerful. So he suggested, why not have a delineated route from region to region?
Yeah.
And that's why there are all these little birds on the map here. But that's his idea. The taxation card.
Okay.
I mean, that Dan Fritz came up with the idea of being able to tax a town. So I'm very much grateful for my playtesting group and the ideas they've come up with.
Very cool. And it's kind of amazing to me. You've been 30 miles away, and I just heard about it because you had an article in the Columbia Business Tribune.
Times.
Is that what Times?
Yeah.
Columbia Business Times, which is a really well done article. And my sister-in-law sent it to me. She's like, "Have you ever heard of this? What is this?" She works for Jeff City Magazine, so I think they're all together.
Yeah.
And so she sent that to me, and I was like, "No, I haven't." And so that's what led me to find you and everything. So, and in that, so we know this is coming to Kickstarter, right? And you are self-publishing. You're doing everything yourself.
Correct.
For the most part. I mean, yeah. You mentioned Jamie in the article.
Yes.
So we know that you're following in good footsteps with Kickstarter, I assume. You didn't just approach him and then do the opposite of him, right?
No. Jamie, he's an interesting story. I mean, I went to Gen Con several years ago and met him. Well, my friend Samuel Tom, Samuel Tom, he's one of my nemesis. He's just, he's brilliant. In fact, he was the 2007 A Game of Thrones card game champion.
Okay.
And so because of that, he knows Eric Lang.
Yeah.
Who invented that. And so he decided that he would introduce me to Eric Lang. He was my first brush with greatness.
There you go.
Well, at that same convention, I run into Bruno for duty.
Yeah.
Who I mean, I played Citadels hundreds of times. I love that game, and I was starstruck in a way,
Yeah.
He was real nice to me. I was able to go to some lectures that Eric and Bruno and some other folks had put on, and got to learn a little bit about the kind of board game making mechanics and engines and whatnot. And lo and behold, I also ran into this guy named Jamie Stagmeyer. Well, he was making this game called Viticulture about winemaking, and I just remember him being very low-key, and I didn't really know who he was, but I sat down next to him, and he taught me to play the game, and he told me that he was the inventor. And I said, "Oh wow, that's great! I'm thinking about inventing a game." And so we played a game, and I was inspired. And a few months later, I decided I would just send him an email. I thought he's probably way too famous to respond, but he did. He responded to a ridiculously long email that I wrote. In fact, I think he was a little bit amused at how earnest I was, and not to mention persistent. And he graciously responded to all my questions, and that stayed with me because, in turn, I want to be that way with other folks, people that are just starting out on their voyage of creating a game. I want to try to give back because Jamie was so good to me. So anyway, long story short, I met up with him at Geek Way this last time.
Okay,
and,
so we might have crossed paths. I was there too. So.
Were you?
Yeah.
We probably passed each other. And he sat down to play Feudum.
Okay.
And not only did he play it, he said good things about it. He compared it to, in depth and aesthetics, to Tricerion, the game.
Okay.
I'd never played that, but I looked it up on Board Game Geek. It was 8.5. It had a nice, loyal following. And I thought, well, that's a compliment.
That is.
And then more recently, he posted some things on Facebook that were positive about Feudum. And so,
cool.
Shoot, I'm not going to call it an endorsement, but his kind words are, I'm sure that they'll go a long way.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll give this game some little bit of credibility.
Yeah. Let's touch on Kickstarter kind of nervousness.
Oh yeah.
and I don't really, I've never asked anybody this. How nervous are you about putting this out there and just saying, okay, it's at your all's
I'm
whim?
terrified.
Okay.
I'm terrified. I mean,
I would be too.
I don't know what's going to happen.
Exactly.
I think that people know about this game. I mean, I can kind of gauge, how many folks have been to the Feudum Board Game Geek page. I can look at how many people have watched the videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
You can't really measure, as far as I know, who comes to your Kickstarter preview page. But I have.
Yeah, I don't know.
But someone told me, they said, I said, how can you build a community? I read Jamie Stegmaier's book. It's a fantastic book. I mean, the guy has done so much for, gaming and entrepreneurship in the game industry. An editor of the Columbia Business Times asked me to kind of rattle off the greats. And so I just said, I rattled off all the greats, Rosenberg and Rainer Knizia and Klaus, I want to say Teuber.
Yeah.
It's Teuber, actually.
Okay.
I had a conversation the other day with someone about this. It's Teuber. And I threw in Jamie's name because he's kind of a modern great.
He is.
Yeah. And he found out that I said that, and he said, God, don't put me with those guys. I'm like, Jamie, no, you're great. Anyway, wait, I lost track of you.
That's okay. I was just asking about how nervous you were and then what it felt like.
Oh, yeah.
And that's okay. You kind of summed it up with that one word, being kind of terrified and kind of just...
Terrified because I don't know if enough people know about it, if I have traction, if I've alienated people by admitting that it's a complex game, sometimes I kick myself. I'm like, I should have just created a card game or something, simple. Because this game has many bits. It has a 24-page rule book, which it's actually 20 pages, and there's some nice narrative fluff in it.
Yeah.
But I hope that there's people out there that will appreciate a heavier game.
Yeah. That's kind of would always be my one worry because you don't see a whole lot of that on Kickstarter much. You don't see those
not anymore, anyway.
In-depth kind of games. You see a lot of the the simple card games, the simple $15 to $20 games. Get them in, get them out, and do that.
Right. Exploding kittens. This game is not.
Yes, no, it isn't. But I think there is a market for it, and I think I mentioned to you. The guys, the folks from Heavy Cardboard, and I think they're kind of helped building that market and everything. So it's somebody, I know they've put it on their list of things to watch for as well. I know Rado did, but he passed on it, which it can be confrontational, but I didn't think it was, you almost don't have to be.
No,
so,
in fact, I tried to tell that to Rado. We had a really great email exchange. He was very gracious to me. He said some really nice things early on. I was on his top 10 most anticipated game list and all of that. And
which I think is where I first heard the name, but I didn't,
Eventually the time came, and he asked for my rule booklet. I sent him a PDF, and he read through it, and afterwards he said, Mark, He used the word love. He says, I love a lot of what you have going here. Unfortunately, it exceeds my threshold for warfare, he called it.
Okay.
And then in parentheses, he explained what he meant by his threshold. He wrote 0%.
Yeah.
And I said, I emailed him back. I didn't give up. I said, no. I said, Rado, you got to understand, I've play tested this hundreds of times, and there are plenty of games where there isn't any conflict. That's just one path.
Yeah.
And when there is conflict, a lot of it is indirect. And he told me, you're giving me the exact same reasons that Jamie Stagmeyer tried to convince me to play test Scythe. And he says, and he laughed about it. And yeah. I think Rado he wants to rid himself of any kind of stress, and any kind of direct conflict in a game can be stressful.
Yep, and it's his prerogative. It's his show.
Absolutely.
But I think you're going to find a following with this game. I have a feeling, and I think you're not going to need to worry. We'll see though. So you're talking Kickstarter in November-ish. We'll just call it that for now.
Definitely November.
What is the entry price for it?
$59.
$59. Okay.
Yeah, and then it goes up from there. I think it jumps to $79.
Okay.
To get minted
you've got
shillings, metal coins.
Yep. I have been to the Kickstarter page, so I've seen it all. I'm just letting you tell it.
And then jumps up from there to get many of the pieces become wooden at the $99 pledge level.
Okay.
But even if you didn't go that high, I always loved games that had a linen finish on the cards.
Yeah.
If you've ever played Goa, the punch board has a real nice texture to it.
Yeah.
My punch board pieces will be 3 millimeter instead of 2. I didn't want to cut corners. I wanted to create, a work of art so that it did the artwork justice.
Yeah.
So.
No, and I did look at the Kickstarter, and I thought the page was. You can tell you know what you're doing. You've got that marketing background, and you've talked to the right people. I think so. I think you got that nailed. So.
Well, thank you. I hope so. I hope people like it and enjoy it. And did I mention I was terrified?
Yes, you did, and it's perfectly understandable. Well, you don't have to be terrified. I'll throw money at it today if I had to. So it was really fun playing it. Like I said, I love that feeling that I got from it. That if I just had one or two more rounds and I could do, or one or two more actions, I could do something. And I also love that the first fact when you said that the game was almost over, my reaction was no. And then when it was over, I was like, man, what time is it? We could play it again, but it's a bit late. So, and my wife might kick my butt. So, do you have any parting kind of thoughts about Feudum that you want to leave everybody with?
Just that it's my opus. This is the sum total of everything that I've learned in my life. I've tried to put a nice backstory to it.
Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of things, the narratives sometimes, unless you're doing an RPG, they kind of get left out. But there's some really rich narratives to some of these Euros that I've played. But in the back of the rule booklet, you'll find that there's a whole story behind the farmer and the knight. And they all have names. By the way, they're all named after my friends.
Oh, okay.
Lord Brett is Brett Barton. The Earl of Alchemy is Lord Arthur.
Okay.
And then, of course, Sir Marcus. That's me.
You had to give yourself the knight.
Yeah. Well, actually, my artist, when he was drawing them, he's like, "Hey, I'm going to make this look a little like you." So,
gotcha.
And he drew himself into the monk. In fact, that's Brother Justinius, named after Justin Schultz. And if you've seen him, he kind of looks like that. He's kind of frazzled because he's always trying to meet deadlines and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Personal touch, fun game. I fingers crossed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me up, a complete stranger, into the house to play a game with you. I appreciate it, and thank you.
My pleasure.
All right. So I had a chance to sit down and play Feudum, as you heard in the interview, and I quite enjoyed myself playing it. I asked Mark in the interview for an elevator pitch, thinking that being a guy who's around marketing and has been studying game design and game publishing, he'd have one down. But I know why he didn't at that point. At least I think I do. This isn't an elevator game. It's not a game that you play in 15 minutes and set it up and go again. This is a big, meaty, old-school Euro that takes work to wrap your head around. I've only played it once. That's why I haven't talked about it much. I haven't wrapped my head around it really to be able to give you coherent thoughts. But I'll give you all a bit of information about it. This isn't going to be an in-depth analysis. This will be some basic rules and the basic ideas of the game. So bear with me for a few minutes here. The game of Feudum is won by the player with the most veneration points over 5 epochs. According to Mark, that's usually about 7 to 10 rounds of play. In the game, you're going to be competing for membership in the 6 different guilds by putting your pawns and/or feudums into play. You're also going to be fighting over control of areas to unlock additional actions and help reinforce your guild status. Trading with the guilds to gather resources. Everyone can trade regardless of status, but only guild members may move the goods from guild to guild for veneration points. This game is really wide open. There are a lot of different paths you can choose to take. But how do you get there? How do you get to that final, that place you want to be? Here's a brief rundown of a round. The first thing you're going to do in a round is you're going to take your actions. What actions, you ask? Well, each player is going to secretly select 4 out of their 11 action cards that they have to play in a round. You're going to be programming your 4 actions in a round. When everyone has selected their cards, the players will take their actions in turn order, one at a time. So these 11 cards, what do? What actions can you take? Well, let's take a semi-quick look at them, knowing that some of these actions may not make much sense now, and I am only talking about the basic actions. Each card does have an advanced action that can be used as well, but we're not touching on that here. The first card is a migrate card. This allows you to bring one of your pawns onto or take one of them off of the board. Each player has 3 pawns, and each pawn will have 6 characters on it. Each character represents one of the 6 guilds. The second card is a move action, which allows you to move equal to the number of pawns you have on the board. So if you have 1 pawn on the board, you may move a pawn from one location to the next, moving along roads or special vessel routes. Also, at the end of this action, if there are resources on the location where you have moved to, you may pilfer one of those resources. Just 1 per movement action. Third up is the influence action, which allows you to place 1 influence marker to each location containing one of your pawns, given that there is room in that location. Each location may only hold a maximum of 3 influence markers belonging to 2 different players, and no player may have more than 2 in a location. Fourth up is the improve action. This allows you to spend your gathered resources to improve an outpost to a farm, or a farm to a town, or even a town to a feudum. Doing this is also going to give you some veneration points and allow you to draw a region tile from the region stack, if the requirements are met. The tiles have numerous uses, one of those being that they can act as a wildcard resource. Bear in mind that while doing these actions, your influence in the guilds can move and fluctuate, especially with others taking actions. So you have to keep an eye on those guilds. They're really, really important. Fifth card is the explore action. If you rule an outpost, you may draw 2 royal writ cards and keep one of them. These cards can be turned in at the end of the game for veneration points with the required king's seal, or they may grant you resources or attack strength. It kind of gives you something to shoot for in the game. The 6th action card is the harvest action. If you rule a farm, you may play the harvest action to draw 5 goods from the haversack to place beside one of your farms, and you will also score 1 veneration point. If you control more than 1 farm, or a feudum, the amount of goods is increased by the amount controlled. Rosary beads can also increase that. The 7th card is the tax action, which simply is if you rule a town, you may tax that town to collect 2 shillings, plus 1 per each additional town and or feudum ruled. The 8th card is sadly the action that pushed Rado away. It's the conquer action, and we won't go into it too much here as there will be plenty of videos showing how this works. But this is your aggression card. This is how you can force others out of areas and gain control, veneration points, and get you onto the military service track, which can cost you big points at the end of the game if you ignore it. But there are other ways to make up for those points that you could lose.
There is simple math and combat evaluations done, but as I said, there will be videos telling you all about how they work. But trust me, it's really a neat way to handle it, straightforward and to the point. We're getting close, folks, just hold on here. The 9th action is the defend action. This is the only card that can be played during another player's turn, and it really is as it says. It's a way to help you defend. The 10th card is the repeat action. So, since you only have one of each of these cards, it would make sense that you could only take each action once per round, right? Well, this is your card to get around that constraint. It allows you to repeat any action that you've already played that round, given that the card that you want to repeat allows it. Not all of them do. Lastly, but certainly not least, is the guild action. This is an interesting one, as this is how you interact with your guilds. Each guild has 3 functions. There's a trade function, which allows any player, regardless of influence in the guild, to trade for resources. Each guild has different resources, so let's dive into the guilds for a second. Just kind of be aware that these are just basic trade functions of the guilds. I'm not deeply analyzing these things, and you're going to kind of know how to play and what the guilds do after this, but you're still going to want to dive in and read the rules yourselves. The Farmers Guild will allow you to trade for food from the haversack, or gain a shilling for every good sent to the Farmers Guild. The Merchants Guild allows you to buy 1 to 3 goods for a stated shilling price in the guild. The Alchemist Guild allows you to buy 1 vessel, submersible, ship, or flying machine for 3 shilling. The Knight Guild allows you to purchase 1 row of your influence markers for 3 shillings. Be aware, you don't start the game with access to all of your influence markers. You have to go out and gain more of them. The Noble Guild allows you to purchase 1 or 2 king seals for 3 to 6 shillings, and the Monk Guild allows you to gain 1 rosary bead for 3 shillings. Now, when paying for these resources, you don't pay the guild directly. You pay according to influence in that guild. 1 shilling would go to the guild master, the next would go to the journeyman, and then 1 shilling goes across the board into either the farmer's purse or the church coffer. Those poor apprentices, their pay goes straight to charity. They don't get to gain anything. The 2 other ways that you can interact with the guilds is to either push or pull. The journeyman may pull, and the guild master may push. This right here was the most unique thing about the game for me. It was something that I have never seen in a game before. Let's just do one example, as I don't think I have it in me to talk about all 6 guilds and their push-pull actions. So let's take the Farmers Guild as our example. First off, the farm may only have so many goods in it. If it exceeds that limit, any goods above that limit go back into the haversack, unless there are rosary beads in the guild. Then the excess is spilled over into the merchant and alchemist guilds in that order, if space permits. So now that we know that, the pull mechanic for the Farmers Guild allows the journeyman at the Farmers Guild to pull 2 rosary beads from the Monk Guild. They pull the rosary bead with the highest and the lowest number on them, and then randomly select one of those, and place that bead into the Farmers Guild, thus increasing the spillover. If the new sum of the beads in the Farmers Guild is 5 or more, the journeyman gains 3 veneration points, and gets to draw 2 royal writ cards, keeping 1 of them. The push out of the guild allows the guild master to move 5 goods or less from the Farmers Guild into the Merchant Guild in their respective bins, thus replenishing the supply, if there is room for that particular type of good in the Merchant Guild. If there is no room for a particular type of good in the Merchant Guild, you cannot transfer that type of good. The goods in the Merchant Guild are arranged in rows and columns, and each of them have costs underneath them. So when you're buying from the Merchant Guild, in that trade thing, you are paying the shilling that is listed underneath the good. You take the good, and you pay for it. There you go. Also, when the Guildmaster performs that push action, the Guildmaster splits any shillings in the farmer's purse, keeping the odd-numbered shilling for themselves. And that's the simple one. The other 5 guilds do somewhat similar things, keeping the economy moving in that circular way that Mark talked about in the interview. So, are we now ready for that second step of a round? You now have to feed your pawns. The easy way to do this is to just turn in 1 food per pawn on the board. But another way is to nourish a pawn with wine. If you have placed a sulfur good in one of the wine barrels that are on the board, you may remove that and place it atop a pawn to feed it for 2 rounds. At the end of the following round, you'll just simply take it off that pawn. So it seems that wine would be really the most efficient way, right? Well, during that first round when the pawn carries the sulfur, their defense and attack capabilities are reduced to 0. We can't have drunken pawns out there fighting, can we? The other trick for this is anytime you gain a sulfur in any way, you have to choose immediately whether you're going to keep that sulfur as a good, or if you're going to put it in the wine barrels for future use. There you go. The third step of a round is to roll the one die in the game, the progress die, and remove a region tile matching the region rolled. Step 4 sees you check for advancement of the epoch marker based on the tiles from in the supply. If a new epoch is triggered, there will be a scoring round. You score for guild status, landscapes, active regions, and you could possibly subtract for disloyalty in epochs 2, 4, and 5 if you're not on the correct catapult space on that military service track. Your last step is going to be you're just going to pass that starting player marker and go again, unless the game ends, in which there is another round of scoring, and the winner is the player with the most veneration points. Well, honestly, that's far more than I was really intending to describe, but I figured I'd give the best quick overview of the rules that I possibly could, so you could go back and understand some of what Mark and I were talking about. The game is pretty deep, and to me it seems to fit that elegant description that some folks like to throw out. I don't like using it, but this is elegant. Everything interacts with everything else in a really beautiful way. The guilds with the constant movement and adjustment and influence requires timing in order to do exactly what you want. Wait a turn too long and someone else may have rendered your move a lot less interesting, so you have to be on your toes. There's going to be a pretty steep learning curve in this one. I played a 3-player game. My first game, Glenn's 5th or 6th, I think he said, and Mark has who knows how many plays under his belt. And the scores showed that. It played out exactly like you would have thought it would. Each of us were separated by 20 points, which was kind of really odd. Mark won with 127, followed by Glenn with 99, and then me with 71. But in spite of that 71-point last place finish, I felt that I was right there. The right actions were there for me for taking. I just didn't manage to do them at the right time. That beautiful feeling you get from an old school Euro that if you just had one more action this round was there all game long. Not in a frustrating way. In a way that made you want to figure out how to get it done. Feudum is not going to be for everyone. Our 3-player game with teaching went about 2.5 hours or so. It could have sped up, but Glenn and Mark were kind enough to humor me a bit and talked amongst themselves as I struggled to wrap my head about what actions I wanted to program each turn, and when in the turn, I even struggled sometimes when I had 3 cards wondering, should I do this action now or should I wait? So there's some of that going on. I will play this with Corinza if she'll try it, but we'll be playing it 2-player a couple times first before we play with others, as the options in this game are so fruitful that some may just get stuck, and I appreciate that. But a lot of other folks, are going to get a little impatient. The art is beautiful, the story really is whimsical, and it all fits together into what I think is going to be a centerpiece game for your collection. The rulebook is really well done. Honestly, he let me read it, and it looks like a professional rulebook has been done by him. So I don't think we really have to worry about that too much. Mark has announced a Kickstarter start date of November 10th, and after our meetup, Mark sent along some information to me that I'll read to you about the Kickstarter and about that elevator pitch I asked for. So here you go. And this is in Mark's voice here. A few important things you can consider adding to the opening and closing of our podcast. Yeah, I should have skipped that part. I am launching on November 10th, a Thursday. The game will include rulebooks in 3 languages, German, French, and English. He totally forgot to include a friend of his named Tim Maylander, who was a playtester, but we'll go ahead and include him now. So there you go, Tim. Finally, I feel he feels like he didn't give that great elevator speech, so we're going to use this. Feudum is a deeply nuanced game for 2 to 5 players that rewards resource management and skillful planning. 6 unique powered characters and multiple paths to victory make for an ever-changing open-world experience each time you play. Each player controls several medieval characters like the wafy farmer Miss Allison or the pious monk Brother Justinius that roam the countryside tending farms, taxing towns, and taking outposts in an effort to rise in power. You will also compete to acquire coveted feudums, which increase your membership status in one of the 6 guilds, but beware. Feudum owners must pay homage to the king through military service or face the charge of disloyalty. Feudum mechanics include action programming, area influence, hand management, and a unique economic ecosystem. The game features the kinds of strategic complexities found in deeper games such as Terra Mystica, Brass, Kalis, and Dominant Species. Richard Ham of Rahdo runs through, put Feudum on his top 10 most anticipated games list. And viticulture and scythe designer Jamie Stegmaier compared Feudum in depth and aesthetics to Tricarion, saying that it was a heavy Euro with lots of interesting decisions and a healthy dose of player interaction. So there you go. I will link the Kickstarter preview page in the show notes. Please go take a look. I really, really think that you're going to like what you see. And I love the options that he has on the page as far as what you're going to get with the game. There are different levels to back at. You can get just the basic game for one price, or you can get the game with some nice metal coins for another price, or you can get the big deluxe, edition for the next price. So if you don't feel like you need all the special blingy things, you can get in there at a really good affordable price, which I believe is $59.99 or $59. I'm not going to swear to it, because I'm not looking at the Kickstarter page right now. And then it just goes up incrementally. Just know that I will be backing it. I'm pretty sure it will be an instant back as soon as I see it. I'm hoping to get to play it again before then. Fingers crossed that some of those two prototypes come back. We'll see. And then that Mark and I can hook up and we can play it again. So I just wanted to give kind of I hate to say brief because I'm going on 20 minutes here. I just wanted to give a brief kind of explanation of the game rules a little bit, the cards and how the guilds work. We don't have all the mechanics. You don't have everything that you need to play the game. There is still some things that you would need to read the rulebook for or be taught. But I just wanted to let you know a little bit about the game, get you all a little bit excited about it, hopefully. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email at wdyptw@gmail.com, and I will try to answer them the best that I can. If I cannot, I will get a hold of Mark, and we'll see what he says. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you for listening to the What Did You Play This Week podcast thing. We are proud members of the Pathological Nerdcasters Network. Find out more at www.pncn.rocks. The What Did You Play This Week podcast thing also has a blog. You can find that at www.wdyptw.wordpress.com. We are also on Facebook. Find us and give us a like over there. We try to maintain a good presence on Board Game Geek, where we have a guild. It's guild number 2101. Join in the conversation. You can find all the contributors on Twitter, and the podcast has an account if you wish to follow us at WDYPTW, which is the same way you can find us on Instagram. In short, if you use social media, we're there, or at least we should be. Search us out. If you have any feedback, questions, or requests, feel free to send an email to wdyptw@gmail.com. And lastly, reviews on iTunes are greatly appreciated and a welcome sight. Have a great week.